Short story collection 3 Sunlight on the Water One Day. In the early afternoon, it started with a declaration that came out of nowhere. Priscilla. Al, I am bored. You shall commence something that is of my interest. Al. Hey, hey, princess. Even a tyrant will be surprised by your opening sentence. I can't keep up with you either if you don't change the pacing of your speech depending on the situation. What was that? Priscilla. I am bored. You shall commence something that is of my interest. If you are unable to do so, I shall lop your head off. Al. Huh! Isn't there no doubt that you're being a tyrant? Al shouted with a muffled voice, holding up both of his hands and gazing up at the sky. Leaning against the iron fence on the balcony, when he stared intently at the magnificent, blue sky, he saw the clouds flow quickly across the wide expanse as they were blown by the wind. Absent-mindedly thinking that tomorrow's weather might worsen. Right after that, the tip of Al's chin, who was leaning backwards, was pushed by a strong force. Al. Duh, whoa, Jaya. Just like that, Al's unsupported body half-rotated, using the fence as a fixed fulcrum. Coming dangerously close to being thrown out into the air, he immediately grabbed onto something with his right arm, desperately pulling over the soft and smooth sensation towards himself. Al. That was close. Right now, I was totally wandering on the border between life and death. Priscilla, unfortunately, your crisis is ongoing nonetheless. No, your current situation is more dangerous. Al. While looking at the garden that was located right below the balcony, right as Al breathed out a sigh of relief, he was told that he was in more danger than before. Letting out a silly voice, Al returned his gaze to the balcony. And then, on the other side of the iron fence, he saw the pale arm that he had hastily clutched onto, the owner of the arm, smiling sadistically. She was a girl with orange hair, clothed in a red dress that boldly exposed her luscious skin. Effortlessly supporting Al's body with her left arm that was in his grasp, she extended her delicate, pale fingers towards him. Al, princess, with a more merciful heart, please hear me out. I only have one thing to ask of you, I promise. Priscilla. Although it was only for a few seconds, you shall embrace the honor of touching my exquisite, gem-like skin and sink to the bottom. Al. Jaya. Along with the cruel pronouncement, the fingers on his right hand were forced off as if they were repelled from her arm. What she did was basically a flick to the forehead, only that she did it on his fingers instead, but the speed and power of the flick was in a different league. A shrill sound resonated, and the force of it sent his whole body airborne. Blown backwards with the feeling of floating in the air taking control over his body, while remaining upside down, he was plunged headfirst into a body of water, submerging below the surface. Right now. I feel like Mr. Al has fallen into the pond. Priscilla. Oh, Schult, you have shown your face at the right moment. Here, I have a desire for tea, so you shall promptly prepare it. It is your job. Do not make me wait. Schult. Why, yes, of course. But Mr. Al also looks like he is in trouble. With bubbles floating out from the gaps in his helmet, Al sank down into the rather deep water. In the distance, he could hear the concerned voice of the boy, as well as a boisterous laugh that came from the girl who was using his predicament as an appetizer for her boredom. I wonder what the heck I'm doing. Thinking that, Al kicked out at the bottom of the pond, propelling himself up to the surface with a powerful thrust. 2. At the southwest area of the Dragon Kingdom of Lugunica, this place was known as the Bariel Barony, which was governed by Baron Lape Bariel. Lape, the lord of the domain, had laid down a rule of tyranny that was hated by all of his people. He had also imposed heavy taxes and made excessive labor mandatory, which caused the Bariel domain to be referred to as a penal colony on one occasion. However, during these few months, the bad reputation of the Bariel domain had disappeared into the shadows. Far from that, rumors were circulating around, saying that the relations between the lord of the domain and the people were at an all-time high in recent years. All of that was because of Lape, who had a change of heart after taking a young, intelligent, and beautiful woman as his wife, the fruit of him starting to make dedicated efforts for his people. Not every one of the people knew that wasn't the case. The change had occurred not in his heart, but the lord of the domain himself. Namely, although Lape had been managing his domain, He came down with an illness, so his wife, who became the lord of the domain on his behalf, had improved the domain's relations with her own ability. Since Leip had fallen ill, the fate of his territory was entrusted in the hands of the elegant woman, replacing Leip's position as the new lord of the domain. Her talents were regarded as something that was divine, and she had captured the hearts of the people all at once. Taking the place of the previous lord that continuously exploited his people was a female lord who administered a reign that supported her people. With her unprecedented, dignified beauty, as well as her frequent observations of the territory that made her easy to approach, the people of the Bariel domain were captivated by her existence. That was the reputation of the compassionate woman, admired and praised by the people as the Sun Princess. Al, if word gets out that the Sun Princess tried to drown her attendant by kicking him into the pond, I have no idea what the people are gonna think about that. Priscilla, do not speak of something that is scandalous as that. To begin with, the dead do not have a mouth to make their voice heard. Comparing the claims of you, a ruffian who is as good as a suspicious man, and the beautiful me, who do you think will the people believe? Al, what you said right now is especially scandalous, without a doubt. Al asserted with a thumbs up, while sitting cross-legged near the pond at the garden of the mansion. He was drenched in water from head to toe due to being submerged in the pond, and his clothes, let alone his underwear, were soaked as well, exposing his Zori to the sun by taking them off. The upper half of Al's body became naked as he took his vest off, struggling to wring it out. Putting the fabric in between his chin and chest, he used his right arm to squeeze it forcefully. It was only natural that he was having a hard time twisting the water out of his clothes, as he was one-armed, since his left arm wasn't at where it should be. Schult, Mr. Al, I will squeeze it. Please leave it to me. Unable to stand by and watch Al continue struggling, the young boy decided to raise his voice. Having a tender and adorable face and wearing a small butler uniform, his appearance was heartwarming because it looked like he was trying to do something that he couldn't do just yet. However, even such feelings were. Priscilla, halt! It will be troublesome if your fingers were roughened from carrying out washing such as that. Shall your comfortability deteriorate, I will immediately dismiss you from the position of lying by my side. Schult, wah, wah, wah. Lady Priscilla, I will be surprised if you hugged me so suddenly. Just as she took him in her arms from behind, the boy with a reddened face, Schult, shrunk into himself. Looking at his embarrassed expression as he was being tucked into the girl's arms, it was a mystery how the smile-provoking impression that he had given earlier had changed into an immoral feel, to the extent that it was almost strange. Priscilla, what, Al? For what reason are you staring at us absent-mindedly with an idiotic look on your face? Saying that, the orange-haired girl who had Schult in her arms smiled daringly. She was certainly the sun, someone with radiant beauty so bright that it would blind the eyes of the people who laid their eyes upon her. Orange hair that shimmered in the sunlight and eyes that were of flames that blazed fiercely. With the engrossing charm that she had, as well as her refined limbs that were exposed without regret, she enthralled the hearts of those who saw her, regardless of if they were a man or a woman. A girl that left an impression so strong that even her red dress didn't look good enough compared to her. She was the very Sun Princess who managed the domain in place of her husband, Priscilla Bariel herself. Al, no, I was just double-checking that one soda is nice, yeah, thank you for the meal. Priscilla, again, that is a word that I do not know of. Is that another one of your hometown's great waterfall language or whatever it is? Al, yeah. Also, there's water here and there in my helmet, and it's hard to see what's in front of me. It's like that. Lining up vague excuses, Al put his hand on his helmet, making it ring as he adjusted it. The clacking sound came from the welded part of the black steel helmet that he always wore on his head. Schult, still held in Priscilla's arms, widened his eyes as he watched Al fiddle with his helmet. Schult, helmet, your helmet will rust if you leave it like that. If your helmet is gone, then you will be headless. It's scary. You need to dry it quickly. Al, your misunderstanding is cute, but it's not my head's made out of iron, so I won't be headless, you know. And there's no need to worry about this helmet getting rusty anyway. Schult, it will not rust. You also have a head, it's a little bit disappointing. Al, I don't know what part of it is disappointing, Schult. Al smiled wryly at Schult, who seemed saddened for some reason, and then slapped the water out of his helmet by hitting it. Al, this helmet's been specially made. It's something that I have quite a connection with, see that? Priscilla, that is the first I have ever heard about it. Where have you stolen it? Al, why is your first choice steel? Come on, put more faith in me. Priscilla, I cannot think that someone of your resourcefulness is able to buy something of that caliber. Where have you stolen it? Al, it's from the Gladiators Coliseum that I was in a long time ago. But it's not like I stole it. It's just that when I was running away from that place, a kind-hearted guy gave it to me. It was being displayed in the Coliseum, so I think it's a pretty decently made helmet. Maybe. The moment the word gladiator popped up in Al's explanation, sorrow flitted across Schultz's expression for a brief moment. However, the attitude of Priscilla, who didn't even bat an eye despite hearing the same word, made Al a little bit happy. Priscilla, you were one of the gladiators at Wallachia, indeed. If that is so, then you must be from somewhere on the Gladiator Island Jinnenhive. That helmet would be an item associated with the Gladiator King, or more accurately, a replica. Al, I can't even hide anything from a knowledgeable human. Yeah, you're right. I was forced to work at the Gladiator Island for so long. I also dropped my left hand there. The helmet's the alternative for my severance pay. Al spat out in such a manner, half sulking at the fact that his personal history had gotten profoundly exposed. Anyway, setting aside where he came from, it was true that his helmet was specially made. There was no need to take it off and dry it. Al, so it's no use even if you make a curious face like that, Schult. Schult. I am not actually curious about it. Men aren't all about their faces. Al. That isn't even a follow-up, and it hurt me unnecessarily. Failing to console Al, Schultz's shoulders sagged dejectedly. Patting the boy's head, when Priscilla casted a sidelong glance at the helmeted man. Priscilla, what? A man's value is not determined by his face alone. However, his face is one of the standards that ultimately decides his worth. Schult, you are also to not forget that you had gained my favor because of your lovable appearance. You must hold back your growth as much as possible. Also, I will be unforgiving of any unwanted hair. Al, at least make it in order that he could work out somehow by putting in effort, Princess. Schult, I will do my best. Al, see, Schult's straightforward, so he believed it. As Schult made his declaration while clenching his fists, Al gave him a pitying look. However, to Schult, devoting himself to Priscilla was something that was pretty much the same as his reason to live. It would be insensitive to get in the way. After choosing which direction her attendant would be going down with a casual remark, Priscilla drew out her fan from her cleavage. No matter how many times Al saw the same gesture, it was a bold hiding place that was also pleasing to the eye. But Priscilla covered her mouth with the fan, and Priscilla. The boredom that had been diverted has returned. Al, before long, you shall provide your next act of entertainment. I have enjoyed seeing you drown in the water. Next shall be, shall you dance atop a fire? Al. Oh, that's a good idea. I also felt like drying my clothes right now, hey, idiot. Priscilla. Despite being about to accept it once, why have you come to your senses so abruptly? What was that right now? Al, I'm just playing the straight man after pretending to go along with the silly man, but don't make me explain. You're gonna shave down my heart. When Al shrunk back, discouraged, he could see that Priscilla's mood was starting to tilt towards the sullen side. She was as fickle as a cat, but she was far more violent than one. That was what was scary about his master. Al tilted his head to the side in contemplation, unsure of what to do although he wanted to humor her in some way or other. Priscilla, as a jester who serves to entertain me, you shall always remain conscious of your minimum duty. Adhere to Schultz's example. If it were my words, that one has the willingness to accomplish it, whatever it is. Al, that's way too much of an unreasonable demand. Priscilla, it is not. Schult, tell me a story that will alleviate my boredom, right now at this place. Schult, yes, I will do my best. Since Al couldn't comply with her wishes, Schult was chosen to be on the receiving end of Priscilla's tyranny instead. Seeing the boy thinking as hard as he could to come up with something was starting to weigh heavily on his conscience, so he attempted to stop it, but Schult. I remember one thing. Just a while ago, a housemaid was talking about a rumor. His face brightening up, Schultz spoke with his hand raised in the air. Schultz, I heard that there's been many cases of people going missing in a village that's at the south of the domain. There's a forest near the village, and it's said that anyone who comes close to the spring will not be able to return. It's a rumor about the nightmare of Ladrima. Ooh, it's scary. Al, what the heck? With you saying stuff about me being headless and all, do you like stories about hollows, ghosts, or something? Smiling wryly at the realization of Schultz's unexpected interest in hollows, Al let the water fall out from the gaps in his helmet. After that, letting out a metallic clunk from the welded part of it, when he turned to Priscilla with a, "Hey, princess." Priscilla, the village in the south, nightmare of Ladrima, a spring that causes people to disappear, I see. Seeing Priscilla muttering wearily made Al have a bad feeling about it. And so, the bad feeling that he had became a reality before he could make a move. Priscilla. Interesting, Priscilla said, closing her fan and pointing the tip of it towards Al and Schultz. Priscilla. It will be enough to relieve my boredom. Why don't I resolve that incident by my own hand? Fully motivated and completely willing to stick her nose in a troublesome matter, Priscilla beamed, her smile as brilliant as the sun. 3. Ladrima, the village that was located in the southern area of the Bariel barony, was a normal village that could be found anywhere. Far away from the kingdom's main highways, any signs of its development were thin. It was nothing more than one of the many villages that existed within the domain, and the only thing that was slightly popular about it was its flowers, which were the village's speciality. The villagers lived their lives with little change because they liked it that way. Because of that, in the present day, Ladrima village was thrown into an uproar due to the strange incidents that rarely happened to them. Al. Well, that's why I said that we should disguise ourselves before coming here. Priscilla, do not utter such foolish things. Why is it necessary for me to disguise myself and elude the attention of the people? There is not a reason that exists for me to feel ashamed. The commoners shall burn my influence into their memories to their heart's content. Al, I'm saying that it's to make sure we don't stand out, not about feeling ashamed, but I guess it can't be helped now. Scratching the back of his neck, Al sighed at the gazes that were directed towards them. All the staring was coming from Ladrima's villagers, who were surprised by the intruders that appeared so suddenly, which was a reasonable reaction. After all, the dragon carriage that pulled up to the village was embellished by gold, silver, and jewelry, which was basically the exteriorized form of a nouveau riche's tastes. Along with a vivid, eloquent golden carriage, if an extraordinarily beautiful girl came into view in addition to that, it was only fair that the villagers would be confused, unsure of what was going on. Just as Al had thought, a large portion of the villagers' astonishment were directed towards Priscilla and the dragon carriage, but he wasn't aware that quite a few of them were staring at the one-armed, helmeted man with an eccentric outfit. If it was the case of standing out, then the master and servant were similar in that sense. Anyway, Al, firstly, the basis of an investigation is making steady progress by gathering information from people, but, Priscilla, slow and steady investigations do not suit me. We shall immediately head towards the spring that was brought up earlier. Al, I thought that you'd say that. Schultz, can you keep company with her? Since his master hated the sound of words such as slow and steady, as well as little by little, it seemed like she had no intention to follow the ironclad rules of investigation. With Priscilla already having grown tired of waiting, Al tried to entrust her to Schultz, who was also accompanying her. However, there was no response from him. Al turned around, only to see the young butler running his eyes over a large book with his undivided attention while making a solemn expression on his face. Al, Schultz, I'm sorry. I was too focused on the book. Al, scolding you with that's neglect of duty. Can wait. What's that book? Schultz, Lady Priscilla gave it to me. She said that it would be useful if I remembered the stories when she is bored. She told me to keep reading it until I can recite it. As Schultz had only recently learned how to read and write, he was struggling with the major challenge that had been given to him, to the point that smoke might erupt from his head at any moment. Priscilla's fickle and self-indulgent actions were a common occurrence, but Al still felt bad for Schultz, since the boy was at the mercy of her whims. Al, Princess, what did you teach Schult this time? I feel sorry for him. Priscilla, knowledge will aid one's life. Schult has a myriad of things that he must learn. Do not measure it with your pathetically small standards at your own discretion. However, I will not deny your feeling of wanting to admire a teary-eyed, assiduous Schult. While covering her mouth with her fan, Priscilla casted a sidelong glance at Schult. Her thoughtfully arranged plans were extremely difficult to find out. It also included the possibility of the plan not even existing, however. Al, Schult'll need to stay strong. Though the villagers' restlessness will probably reach its limit pretty soon, we should really explain the whole thing to them. Priscilla, in addition to that, you will be gathering information from the people slowly but steadily, you are saying. Well, I suppose that is all right. Until Schult finishes reading his book, I shall make an exception and go with you. Priscilla accepted Al's apprehensive suggestion without protesting, much to his surprise. Before she changed her mind, he raised his hand while facing the people who were gathering around them at a distance. Al, sorry for surprising you guys. We aren't anyone suspicious. We might not look like it, but please think of us as something like an investigative team. Recently, there's a couple of incidents that's been occurring around this village, right? We're here to investigate it. Gesturing towards the 3 people in the group, including himself as he clarified the purpose of their visit, the villagers exchanged glances with each other. Putting it honestly, there was no persuasiveness in what he said. Along with his claim that they weren't suspicious, and the investigative team that consisted of a woman, child, and a helmeted man, there were too many dubious points. Al was already prepared for the information gathering to become complicated and arduous. However, the woman by your side, I may sound rude if I say this, but is she the Sun Princess? Al, oh, the person that tentatively stepped forward was a man with short hair with a few gray hairs mixed in, who looked close to being middle-aged. He gazed at Priscilla, as if he was acting as the representative of the villagers' opinions. Receiving his gaze, Priscilla gave a small sniff, along with a HMPH. Priscilla, not once have I ever called myself with that name. However, it is true that the commoners within the domain have been regarding me fondly as such. If you gaze at my eminent beauty that is identical to the sun, it is a reasonable conclusion nonetheless. Man. Oh, just as I thought. The man's eyes shone as he heard Priscilla's words, which were rather excessively self-conscious. And then, his astonishment and amazement having been transmitted to the other villagers, they all kneeled down simultaneously. Man, too, to think that the Sun Princess would actually visit us. We were consulting the surrounding villages about the spring, but, Priscilla, it was passed from one place to another, and it has finally reached my ears. I have arrived at this village in person because of that. Surely, I am able to expect that you will not waste my effort in coming here by feigning ignorance, saying that it is a matter that has been already dealt with. Man. Yes. Taking control of the villages will within an instant, Priscilla gazed over at the kneeling villagers with satisfaction. After that, she turned around to face Al, who stood still the whole time. Priscilla. Here. What are you doing, Al? Making slow and steady progress is your task. I shall be displaying my authority like this. While I am doing that, you shall promptly fulfill your role. Al. That's fine by me, but I dunno, but I'm not satisfied with that. When he went along with Priscilla to do something, there were times that Al seriously doubted if he was making the right call or was actually mistaken. It was probably because he had never seen her fail. Priscilla. Naturally. After all, this world is made to be convenient to myself. Saying her signature phrase dauntlessly, Priscilla laughed as she gave Al a supportive push on the back. Afterwards, thanks to the obedient and cooperative villagers, the gathering of information progressed quite smoothly. Al, there's a forest next to the village, and there's a spring in it. And during these 2 months, they say that the people that headed for the spring all disappeared one after another. First, it was a villager, then it was the person who went to look for the missing villager, and then it was someone who stopped by, and then Priscilla. An unusual rumor had been spread, and once in a several days, there will be someone who would approach the spring and then vanish. What a peculiar, absurd idea it is. Priscilla narrowed her eyes against the information that had been gathered from the villagers, which was organized and presented to her in a straightforward manner. She sounded terribly bored, but Al had the same opinion as her. Undoubtedly, it was no more than the saying. A mummy hunter becoming a mummy, consequently happening in real life. Al. They also said that they sent out search parties from the village over and over again, but the end result was always terrible. Apparently, the forest becomes foggy, and they were alone when they realized it. There were also instances of some managing to come back safely, but some people also don't come back. So that's how a missing person incident happens consecutively. Priscilla. That is not enough of a reason for the continuous damage that has been done to this village. The foolish commoners who dare to venture into a dangerous forest are surely not limited to the people in this village. What lured in the outsiders? As expected, Priscilla was looking at things differently. Impressed by what she focused on, Al whistled to express it, but his whistle didn't give out any sound. Before he incurred Priscilla's displeasure with the noise that sounded like a hoarse sigh, he cleared his throat with an ahem. Al. This is the masterpiece. It's about this spring, but it was exaggerated even before the rumors were spread. Approaching the spring, you will be swallowed up by the fog. If you manage to pass through it, supposedly you can meet the dead. Priscilla. Huh, meeting the dead, I see. Al, there's also rumors of it being connected to the afterlife or whatever, but both of them are a bunch of nonsense. But unexpectedly, there's no end to the amount of people that are being tricked by that rumor. As of now, only a few dozen people fell victim to it, but it could turn into a major incident if the numbers keep increasing. If the source of the rumors, the root of all evil, wasn't resolved quickly, then it could develop into a situation where the country has no choice but to move. Once that happens, even if the issue was settled, Priscilla's capabilities as the lord of the domain would be questioned. As someone who was waiting to participate in the royal selection, it would be preferred if she was prevented from being put in a bad position. Thinking from that point of view, Schultz's choice to pick up the rumor of the incident was absolutely correct. Because of that, they were able to make moves that were necessary to solve the problem. Al, what do we do, Princess? Forming a quick investigative team and stamping out the issue could be one choice we could make. Priscilla, obviously, we shall immediately head into the forest and inspect the actual spring. If it is a problem that I am able to settle, then I shall put an end to it with my own hands. Are there no objections? Al, are you serious? By heading into the forest, you mean you would go in there? Bugs might jump out of there, you know. Priscilla, fool, is that enough of a reason for me to withdraw from it? First of all, my radiant authority repels the likes of insects. Declaring something that couldn't really be asserted as a lie, Priscilla appeared to be fully motivated to enter the forest. That wasn't a decision that was meant to be praiseworthy, since Al knew that Priscilla didn't say that just because she wanted to deal with the problem right away. It was just that he thought that she seemed rather proactive in resolving the issue. Unlike her usual self, she was being supportive. However, the level of Al's bewilderment was not as much as the villagers that just heard of Priscilla's plan. The idea that the representative of the Lord of the Domain, Priscilla, would be directly venturing into the forest provoked a type of perplexity that made them feel like their world was turned upside down. Panicking and all flustered, the villagers attempted to stop her from doing so. Man, we cannot let the Sun Princess do such a dangerous thing. If you insist that you must go, then we will follow you. Every villager will aid Al. Wait. I know that you're worried, but every villager. Don't be ridiculous. We won't be able to move a muscle if a huge crowd comes with us. Al spoke up, alarmed when the chief of the village lost his cool. But it seemed like the man wasn't the only person to believe in the reckless plea that he made on the spot. The villagers genuinely looked ready to accompany Priscilla. The chief gripped his fist tightly, a slight tremor in his voice. Man, the previous era of the Lord of the Domain felt like hell. Words are not enough to describe our gratitude towards you, the Sun Princess, who is now governing the domain instead of that lord. At least please let us be your meat shields. Priscilla, that way of thinking is not bad. You are doing quite well for a band of commoners. Do not forget the loyalty that you are pledging to me. Al, is it the time to be saying that? Priscilla sounded content, but it would only be troubling and burdensome even if they brought along a ton of people who were unable to fight. Using his vocabulary to its fullest extent, Al struggled to cajole the villagers into stopping them from providing their assistance. Al, we really appreciate that you guys feel that way, but there's no point in overloading ourselves with meat shields. The Sun Princess wishes for you guys to stay here quietly, waiting for good news. Priscilla, that is quite a convenient interpretation of my words. Al, the Sun Princess wishes for you people of the domain to remain safe. Hurrah, long live the Sun Princess. Villagers, long live the Sun Princess. When Al lifted his arms into the air with desperation, the villagers were enticed into doing the same whilst raising their voice. The situation was being developed way too forcefully, but with this, Al hoped that he was able to put a stop to the villagers' self-sacrifice. After that, all they had to do was hurry up and leave before the villagers came to their senses. Al, let's go, Princess. Life is limited, but the possibilities are infinite. Let's go to a hopeful tomorrow. Priscilla, let's go, was it? That is a new word from the great waterfall language. I like the sound of it. When Al gently tugged at Priscilla's hand, she followed him without getting angry nor protesting. Behind her, Schult was still grappling with the contents of the book, following them while looking like his head was going to explode at any moment. Priscilla, well then, we shall be settling the situation promptly. Let's go. Using the newly learnt word, Priscilla authorized the departure of the dragon carriage in a good mood. The villagers saw through the gold-adorned carriage's departure, giving Priscilla their 3 rounds of cheers all the while. For the forest with the spring in question had a peculiar ambience that floated around it, as if it was rejecting any person from entering it. Whether it was due to the problem of the spring that was happening, or whether it was something unique to the forest that was there from the start, whichever it was, there was no mistaking that something malevolent was permeating the area. Al, well, we're ignoring that and trespassing on the forest without hesitation, though. Al muttered out calmly, while treading on the grass that peeked out from the ground and straining his eyes at the overgrown trees. Several dozen minutes after departing from Ladrama, the group of 3 had arrived at their destination and had already begun their investigation whilst trampling on the ground. Of course, they couldn't ride through the forest in the dragon carriage, so the inspection was being conducted on foot. Al walked at the front, using his blue dragon sword to make a path by cutting down the greenery that blocked their way. They marched ahead in a way that the 2 people behind him were following after his footsteps, which were made by the firm steps of his Zari. Anyway, Al, wasn't it better to leave Schult at the dragon carriage together with the driver? Turning his head to the side, Al spoke to the 2 people behind him, Priscilla, who was boldly heading further into the forest with her high-heeled shoes, and Schult, who was timidly tagging along while linking arms with her. Upon hearing those words, the look on Schult's face morphed into an apologetic one. On the contrary, Priscilla glowered at Al. Priscilla, fool! If Schult had been left at the dragon carriage, then I cannot see the point in bringing him with us. I am able to discern that you wish to be alone with me in the dark, but you think too much with the lower half of your body. Al, I didn't make that suggestion out of immoral thoughts. It's made out of the purer upper half of my body. Schult, it's all right. I will do my best so that I will not inconvenience both of you. I will fall down. I endured it, Priscilla. Well done, Schult. I shall praise you for that. Unlike Al, who had gotten his suggestion brushed aside, Schult looked delighted, complimented by Priscilla after nearly tripping over. It wasn't like he was jealous. Perhaps, maybe. Rather than that, the slow pace they were walking at and the tense atmosphere was a larger issue to him. The uproar about the spring didn't draw too much of his interest, but he was getting stressed by how sluggish and leisurely they were being. Al, why don't we just torch the forest? That way it'll be quick and easy 'cause the spring will also evaporate. Priscilla, the number of foolish statements that you make have been increasing more than usual, Al. Firstly, how will you make up for it if you settled the incident using that method? That is as good as defeat. Al, is it a problem of winning or losing? Priscilla, everything will be, if one regards it as such. Since losers continue being defeated without recognizing that, the belief that they will lose before the match even begins is ingrained into them. Priscilla asserted fiercely, crossing her arms with a to begin with. Priscilla, I am also fond of flames. Burning objects makes me excited. However, setting the forest on fire just because there are people who approach the spring, that is a lowly, wretched reason for the wildfire it would cause. How preposterous. Al, what I don't understand more than that are your preferences, but okay, I get it. I'll go back to cutting down the plants. Instantly deciding that it was meaningless to oppose Priscilla's views, Al focused on creating a path they could walk on with his blue dragon sword. The road to their destination was a trackless path. The forest was so dense that he could understand why many people went missing. But it also made him wonder if the reason why they were disappearing was unrelated to the spring. There was not much of a reason for one to enter a forest that wasn't that big. Although, that was only fair because it didn't even meet the requirements of having a path so that people could pass through. Priscilla. Tempted by the forest's spring, I see. What a hackneyed tale. Priscilla spoke out from behind, sounding like she was trying to stifle her boredom. Hearing that, Al agreed with a yeah. Al, apparently, the first person that went missing saw some magnificent light that danced in the forest. They were led by it, and went after it without thinking, and now, those who want to meet the dead keep getting swallowed by the spring one after another. Priscilla. Wanting to meet the dead, it is increasingly being reduced into a hackneyed tale. Al felt like something was off with what Priscilla had just said. Boredom, anger, dissatisfaction, contentedness, joy. Her whims were erratic and elusive, but what she muttered out didn't match any of those emotions. It was as if she currently felt an emotion that was something similar to envy or jealousy. That was what he thought. Al, Princess, you don't have someone you want to meet. Priscilla, I have no idea. Recently, the only person I am familiar with who has passed is my beloved husband. Al, he's not dead yet. Looking from an outer point of view, he's just under medical care. Priscilla, he even leaves the care of his excretory system in the hands of others. That is surely the equivalent of being dead. Al could no longer see any strange indications in her attitude, which wasn't even trying to hide her disgust. Ignoring it and shrugging his shoulders, he looked at Schult, who had remained quiet during their exchange. Perhaps the topic he and Priscilla had spoken about was upsetting for a boy that was young as Schult. Just as he expected, Schult seemed to remember the person who was brought up in the conversation, his face turning white as paper. Schult, Master was a bad person, right? Al, the opposite of justice is another type of justice. There's a wise saying like that, but Master Lape can't be referred to as just, to say the least. He's a completely evil guy, though it's not like we're the just ones either. Priscilla's husband and someone who was the original lord of the Bariel domain, Lape Bariel had been scheming to seize the kingdom's real power by using her as his puppet. However, his aim has been shattered by Al and Schult, and he had already been broken down mentally, losing the ability to function normally in everyday life. Al, there were a lot of people who were happy to see him like that. It's evidence of Princess's popularity, but it's pitiful. Schult, but I will pray for his soul to be at peace. Al, I said he's not dead, Al tried to say, but paused when he saw Schult fold his hands with a solemn expression. He supposed that it was all right that at least one person would earnestly mourn for Lape, hoping that the Lord would become even a little bit better in his next life. Priscilla, stop that, stop that. It is a waste of time, praying for that gaunt, senile man. However, it seemed like Priscilla disapproved of the prayer that Al had turned a blind eye to. With a fiery look in her eyes, she shook Schult's head, who was clinging on to her arm. Priscilla, if you have the time to spend on such trivial matters, return to memorizing the contents of the book. Schult, yes, I will memorize the contents of the book. The first one is, Al, don't bully a pure kid. Although Al touched on Priscilla's immature behavior, Schult stopped praying and went back to his recitation of the book. Poor Lape, he thought as he internally put his hands together in a prayer for the Lord instead, driving his sword into a remarkably thick branch that was in front of him and slicing it off. Priscilla, speaking of Al, you seem to reject the idea of meeting the dead, almost terribly so. Al, because there's no way it exists. If we die, it's over. We can't meet the dead, and we aren't allowed to try and meet them. It'll only make us miserable. You have the same opinion, right? The space between the trees was small and narrow. Nicking a branch, Al kicked it in. It didn't break with one hit. He bashed it with his foot again, but it still refused to break off. The wood was tough. Priscilla, even if we have arrived at similar conclusions with me and you, the processes that we have gone through to reach that are disparate. We cannot meet the dead. That is true. Al, with his third kick, the tree toppled over with a dull thud. Lifting it up with his shin and moving it aside, he continued creating the path, Priscilla. Or is it that there is someone you do not want to meet? Grinding his teeth at the words that rang in his ears, his leg that he put too much strength in flung aside the fallen tree. It rolled across the forest floor in a disorderly fashion, disturbing the nearby leaves and branches, and Al blew out a long breath. She was really a girl who would bluntly and mercilessly trample down the hearts of other people. Al, you know what, princess? Do you really think I'll talk about something as serious as that? Forcefully calming down his heart, Al feigned an easygoing attitude and turned around. However, his words didn't reach Priscilla. It wasn't only her, but Schult as well. The area was foggy, and Al was alone before he knew it. 5. Al surveyed his surroundings. When he realized it, his vision was clouded in white, and it felt like he was in a world that was only vaguely a forest. In fact, he was unsure if he really was still in the forest. Unable to sense the presence of the two people who were right next to him, he placed his blue dragon sword on his own shoulder. Al, you're kidding me. This is unfolding just as I heard how it'll go like. The villager's testimony, the story that he was doubtful of, thinking that it was just a fishy tale, had become reality. Entering the forest of the spring would cause the intruder to be captured by the fog, leaving them all alone. There were people who managed to pass through it and return, but if they were unlucky, then they would be dragged into the spring. Al, and they'll be able to meet the dead, huh? Sorry, but that doesn't make me happy. Depending on the person, it might be worth taking the risk of going missing for that, but reuniting with the deceased only made Al feel like it was uncanny. Al, instead of that, I'm happier if I could accidentally touch Princess under the cover of the fog. Prioritizing his ulterior motive over the sacred mystery of the spring, Al reached out his blue dragon sword and parted the fog. The tip of the sword touched thin air, and he couldn't detect the existence of the trees that were previously crowded around the area. It was unnatural. Following the theory of when one became lost in an unfamiliar place, it would be wiser to stay put as much as they could. However, Al knew that his two companions, who were unconventional and unknowledgeable respectively, would probably not adhere to that. Al, I have no choice but to look for them. Give me a break. Breathing out a sigh at the situation where he had no choice but to actively move around, he slowly advanced into the fog. Fog being attributed to a sign of misfortune was an idea that was accepted in every part of this world. The kind he was surrounded in was different from the fog that would be primarily thought of as a bad omen, but it didn't lessen its eeriness. Raking away at the fog that was so thick that he could feel it, Al strained his ears, seeking to meet up with his two companions. He was reluctant to call out to them because of his instinct. Somehow, he had a bad feeling about it. It was, who is it? Al stopped in his tracks, cautious of the breath that he heard beyond the fog. On the inside of the helmet, what stirred his eardrums was the sound of someone else's breath, but it was too deep for him to think that it was Priscilla nor Schult. The other person obviously sounded like a man. None of his company matched that description. With tensions running high, Al braced himself. In front of him, he could hear the faint sound of footsteps drawing near, heading towards him expeditiously. Surely there was no way that the deceased would actually appear. I found you, traitor. Al. As Al shuddered, an old man with a robust physique broke through the fog, appearing before his eyes. He was a white-haired elderly man who wore well-tailored clothes and had eyes that were murky with ambition. He was someone that Al recognized. Eyes boiling with hatred, the man glared at him. You are, Al. I said he's not dead. Before the man spat out his rage, Al directed a slash at him that diagonally cut him down. Unable to react in time to the sudden act of violence, the old man received the full extent of the blow. Then, the man simply dispersed into nothing as he fell on his back, melting into the fog without leaving a single trace behind. Watching the man disappear, Al lifted up his blue dragon sword while breathing heavily. There were no bloodstains on its blade. Al, Hey, so it's really a fake story? At least bring the dead to me. The dead? At the sudden appearance of the old man who had been recently brought up in a conversation, moreover, who was still alive, Al expressed his anger towards the sloppy and careless supernatural phenomenon. No matter how he looked at it, what just happened was way too realistic. It probably wasn't because it decided to listen to Al's opinion, but as he kept on ranting, multiple shadows emerged around him, switching places with the disappearance of the fake Lape. A huge man who was armored from head to toe, a black-clothed man who held a long katana, a half-naked, smaller man who had blades fused to his fists, and there were also others that Al could recognize. He let out an involuntary sigh. Al, an assembly of fellow gladiators is fine by me, but what the heck? Did you guys die without me noticing? There was no response. Instead of that, the black-clothed man lashed out his weapon, drawing a horizontal line. Al immediately closed the distance, crouching down to avoid the silver flash of the blade. He had challenged that one strike thousands and 10,000s of times. His body remembered what was coming. Meeting the knee that followed after the first strike with his own sword, Al skewered his opponent the moment he lost his footing. The huge, armored man had the habit of raising his arm whenever he executed a powerful technique. The smaller man distanced himself from those who flung themselves at him while expecting to die, fearing the damage that could be done to him. Nothing had changed. In fact, they were worsened in terms of quality. They're not faithful enough to the original. Carving through the torso of the large man who raised his arm, Al threw the blue dragon sword at the place where he knew that the smaller man would retreat, seeing that he refused to come any closer. Spewing out fog instead of blood from where they were fatally wounded, the imposters of his old friends vanished. The next one that appeared wasn't a gladiator. However, Al recognized his face as well. With all his gratitude, he swung his sword. Al, thank you very much for the farewell gift. He sliced through the neck of the gatekeeper, the person who had given the steel helmet to him as a parting gift when he escaped from the Colosseum. Watching the leering smile dissolve into the fog, Al confirmed that he repelled the second wave of enemies. Al. Got him it, making me do something that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Everyone was alive when I ran away from there in the first place. It's only Gadget that I killed. Just as what he did to the imposter, Al had killed Gadget by skewering him in the stomach. If that was it, then it could be said that he certainly did meet the dead. Al, smells fishy. Well, it's out of the question if you can't pick who you want to see. It would only perplex the person who went to meet the deceased if the people they were previously affiliated with were haphazardly summoned left and right. To begin with, the living were also appearing, so the preconditions of meeting the dead had already fallen apart. Al, though, I'm dealing with the rumors in order. Is the afterlife the next thing I'll be debunking if things go on like this? In that case, he predicted that the name Al would be put on the list of missing people. The requirements for that would be him being killed by the fog that he encountered moments ago, or having a separate, unpredictable event happen in the same area. Al, seems like the third wave arrived while I was talking about that. As Al assumed a stance with his sword held firmly in his hand, fed up with the whole thing, the fog in his sight began squirming around. The silent, swirling fog weaved itself to form a shape, molding it into the existence of a new being. By now, he wouldn't be surprised no matter who came to him. That was what he thought. However, the being that was supposed to be constructed by the white fog was pitch black to the point that it completely filled up his vision. Slender limbs that were cloaked by the color of darkness. The churning fog was engulfed by the jet-black shadow that expanded vehemently, losing its original form and causing the world to be overwritten with ease. What was replicated was a forbidden being who shouldn't have been there. Al. Ah! A hoarse breath escaped from his lungs, and Al became aware that he was pinned down and rendered useless. He had realized that this fog replicated the people that its target had some kind of connection to, whether they were dead or not. However, this was breaking the rules. This transcended life and death. This was a blasphemous act against everything that ever existed. Al. Unexplainable, vicious fury flared up from within Al, making him let out a shout that was driven by his raging emotions. He had to obey the voice that inspired his willingness to act, kicking off the ground and cleaving through the shadow in front of him, using every last bit of his strength. That was what he needed to do. Despite that, his shout of determination rang shrilly. The foot that was supposed to kick the ground trembled, and the sword that he was planning to hack into the enemy with had slipped out of his loosened grip, falling down onto the floor. He couldn't move. He wasn't able to move. It was impossible to do so because it was hopeless. Thousands, 10,000s, several hundred millions of tries. Even with all that, it was futile. Even now, Al had been already certain that it was impossible. His teeth chattering, Al felt like his knees could give out at any moment. In front of him, the shadow began advancing slowly towards him. The black-clad being was wearing a dress that was of the same color as the darkness that hid her from the world. The hem of her dress swayed in the shadows, and her thin arms were lifted up while straightened. He saw every one of her delicate, supple fingers. Silent, tender, and loving, they reached out for his defenseless neck. He would be at ease if she touched him. He would be at ease. That's why. The sudden jolt of terror caused Al to crumple to the ground, landing squarely on his bottom. Just like that, the inadvertent petrification of his body had worn off. Doing everything he could to pull back, he attempted to distance himself from her. Al, top, I'm. His voice cracking, Al's shout refused to manifest as one. The shadow didn't pay attention to his rejection, closing the distance that he had just widened, walking up to him and persisting in laying her fingers on him. Al was on the verge of letting out a scream of despair, but Al, "Hey!" The next moment, the shadow's chest was pierced by a crimson, lambent sword from behind. While he was taken aback by the sight that was unfolding before him, a blinding light emerged from where the blade had struck immediately after. A red and white refulgence swelled up one after another, and the darkness that was made out of the fog burst into flames instantaneously. Her whole body was fully blanketed in fire. How frivolous! In the end, a counterfeit is nothing more than this. Beyond the fog that was evaporating into a scarlet blaze, the voice of the bored-looking girl reached Al's ears. On the other side of the wall of flames that flickered between them, there stood Priscilla, a crimson sword held in one hand. The power of the treasured sword had incinerated the shadow that was weaved by the fog. It had been right in front of Al. Al, how dare, Priscilla. Al, look at what you've done. In front of me, how could you bah? Priscilla, hold your tongue. Do not point your misdirected anger at me, foolish commoner. As Al grinded his teeth, his body shaking with raw fury, Priscilla ruthlessly delivered a sharp blow to the side of his face with her sword. Tipped over by the force of the hit, Al blinked in surprise from the impact. Al, prin, whoa, hot, jaya, fire, fire. Priscilla, this is your penalty for your insolence. With the flames of the Yang sword, you shall become a little bald and reflect on your actions. As the result of receiving punishment from the heartless Priscilla, a part of Al's helmet was lit on fire. He made an effort to put it out by desperately rolling around on the forest floor, sinking to the ground in a slovenly manner after the flames were extinguished. Looking down at Al, Priscilla stuck her Yang sword into the ground, letting out a disdainful sniff as she did. Priscilla, the more shackles that are chained to one, the more they will be tempted by these kinds of evils. The more one puts on a front of disinterest, the more likely they will be to turn out like this. How disgraceful. How laughable. Al, P-Princess, are you the real one? You're not fake, right? Priscilla, if I step on you like I usually do, will the pleasure cause you to recall your memories? Al, wow, really faithful to the original. You're the real one? Looking up at the beautiful girl who was tilting her head with a touch of her cruelty, Al was relieved, feeling that he had returned to the world that was within the territory of sanity. Right before that, he still felt the effects of the terror that had been replicated, but now that it had been dissipated into the fog, he could tell himself that it was a counterfeit. There was no problem. There shouldn't be. For now, he could simply be happy with being able to meet up, and also how neither of them were harmed in any way. Al, you're completely fine, Priscilla. There is no possible way that I will be enticed by such a lowly illusion. Do not move unnecessarily from where you are. The fog will be clear soon. Schult shall be clearing it out. Al, Schult will... Why, Priscilla? I have given him the answer. If Schult is not an egregious fool that knows no bounds, then there is no problem. With the mention of the young butler who wasn't present at the moment, Al was puzzled by Priscilla's doubtless, unhesitating assertion. However, his puzzlement wasn't solved by words, but rather it was solved by the results. A twisting curve. It was definite, greatly distorting Al's vision to the point that it could only be described as that. Within the contorting realm, the scenery alone was wrenched out of shape, since there were no changes to Priscilla, who remained standing with her arms crossed. Leaving her and Al unharmed, only the world was given a tremendous twist, warping and tearing off. After that, the fog gradually came apart, shredded indiscriminately Al. No way. Right after Al blinked his eyes, the fog that had been scattered around in huge quantities had completely vanished. He and Priscilla were back inside of the forest, and in addition to that, they were transferred onto a patch of grass on the side of the spring. In front of the dumbfounded Al, a spring that wasn't that large was stretched across the area. The water was crystal clear, with countless water weeds floating on its surface, and he could see that the petals were swaying in the wind here and there. And a boy was standing in the middle of the spring, waist deep in the water with both of his hands raised in the air. Al, Schult, what are you doing? Priscilla, Schult has banished the evil that has been encircling this spring, creating the fog, leading astray those who lost their way, and submerging them into the spring when they have been spellbound. A bewitching, hideous evil such as that. Saying that to the astonished Al, Priscilla glared at the spring with an expression of displeasure. Noticing that the two were present, Schult's face lit up with joy, and he started heading in their direction. Schult, La Lady Priscilla, Mr. Al, I found it, as you can see, the water mirror. It was sunken under the water just as you taught me. Al, by just as you taught me, you mean? Schult, in the book that was given to me. It was just as what was written in the fairy tale. As Schult said that while wading through the water, making his way back to them, Al was struck speechless, remembering the book that the boy had been reading. The book that Priscilla had made Schult read until he knew it by heart, making him recite it even when they were in the forest. The book was about Priscilla, springs, lakes, and the edge of the water. Near those places, there are an abundance of anecdotes such as this one. If that is so, in areas of water where its flow is concentrated into one place, mana is prone to piling up in there. Naturally, although rare, there are cases where it would give rise to phenomenons like this. Schult, the secret of how not to be tempted by the monster, or the hollow, at the edge of the water was written in it. Priscilla, it is a fairy tale to read aloud to children, amusingly. Priscilla explained, casually closing one of her eyes, but Al's stupefaction remained lingering, unable to be subdued. That meant that she had already discerned the truth of the spring, right from the very moment where she caught wind of a part of the rumor. Schult, Lady Priscilla, this is the water mirror. I broke it and the fog disappeared. Jumping out of the spring, Schult made a dash towards Priscilla, even though he was soaked to the bone. In front of her, he handed over a faintly white, translucent crystal to her. That was probably the water mirror. Priscilla, well done, I shall praise you for it. Schult, thank you very much, I am happy that I could be of help. As Priscilla received the water mirror, drawing back her chin, a broad smile spread across Schult's face. Watching the two's interaction from behind, Al scratched the back of his neck, feeling awkward. Al, so is the case settled now? The incident was caused by the evil doings of the accumulated mana, or whatever. Priscilla, like that, an incompetent one might have jumped to that conclusion before heading back. Detecting a hint of menace in her callous remark, both Al and Schult widened their eyes. Shortly afterwards, the water mirror burst into flames in Priscilla's hand. Transparent chunks of mana were scorched by the heat, and then, hic, the water mirror changed its form abruptly, flinging itself out of Priscilla's hand. Two pairs of wings, a small, blue-colored body, and goggling compound eyes. It was an abnormal being that had the body of a human, along with the wings and head of an insect. Letting out a high-pitched shriek, the misshapen being attempted to escape from the area. However, Priscilla, do you really believe that I will let you escape with ease, evil spirit? The tip of the twirling yang sword sliced off the wings of the small being, boring through its torso and pinning it to the ground. Immobilized on the ground like a preserved specimen, the abnormal being thrashed its limbs around, struggling to free itself. Hick! Priscilla, do not chitter about like a bird. Combined with your appalling appearance, I am thoroughly disgusted by your existence. Priscilla twisted her sword in an irritated manner, drawing out additional screams from the insect-like being. Witnessing such a scene, Schult fell down, his legs giving out, and Al gulped in a large breath of air. Al, Princess, is that a spirit? Priscilla. It is, as you can see. For the most part, the water mirror had disguised itself as something that was naturally created, in an attempt to wait until we have passed through. That shamelessness, as well as its audacity to underestimate me, is deserving of 10,000 deaths. Al. Oh, it's an evil spirit. It's the first time I've seen one. Al grimaced, looking at the spirit, the evil spirit that was desperately gasping for breath, skewered by Priscilla's yang sword. Evil spirits were a species of spirits, but there were no differences between the two in a strict sense. However, as spirits that harbored malice against both people and animals, the term evil spirit had spread far and wide. Originally, spirits were supernatural life forms that were represented by mana, mostly free from the rights and wrongs of the physical world. On the other hand, it was a rare occurrence, but spirits that evidently bore ill will towards those around it, such as what was inside of the water mirror, were born. They were called evil spirits and were given the same treatment as witch beasts, designated as the harmful enemies of humanity. Priscilla, this one had been luring humans to it by utilizing the ability of the water mirror, drowning them in the spring and absorbing all of their odd. Presumably, it used that method to amass its strength. It is similar to the traits of a carnivorous plant. Her explanation implied that the missing people had fallen victim to the evil spirit scheme, over and over and over. Having the desire to meet the dead, if the missing people had entrusted their single wish to the spring, and were able to reunite with the people they wanted to see before dying, then that didn't sound too bad. However, if they were devoured with their wishes in vain, then Schult. Lady Priscilla, this evil spirit, what will you do with it? Priscilla, obviously I will dispose of it. It went ahead with its barbarous acts within my domain. There is no atonement for that, no matter how many times I shall slaughter it. Yet I am benevolent and generous. Since although it is deserving of 10,000 deaths, I shall be settling it with only one. Schult seemed to hold a small amount of sympathy for the evil spirit that was letting out anguished screams of pain. In spite of that, Priscilla simply paid no mind to his pity. Perhaps the evil spirit had found a ray of hope in Schult's behavior, as it stopped its thrashing limbs, lifting its neck so that the boy could see it, starting to cry out as if it was making a desperate appeal. It looked like it was acting as if it was begging for help, as if it was saying that it would do anything for it. Schult. Gazing at the evil spirit, Schult's voice caught in his throat, tears welling up in his eyes. Even with him glancing over at her while being at a loss for words, Priscilla's blood-red eyes did not waver even in the slightest. And then, before unnecessary friction was created between the girl and the boy, Al interjected. Al, imagine this. I did it on impulse. I won't do it again. I'll turn over a new leaf, even if it's trying to tell you that. Schult, Mr. Al? Al, you heard it back in the village. The first victim was led by a swaying light inside the forest. That means this guy has been targeting humans from the very beginning. Evil spirits were evil spirits. Their nature wouldn't warp into something else so abruptly. There was no reason for their malignity either, as they were purely an enemy against humanity. Because of that, there was no need for sympathy nor compassion. Priscilla, at most, you shall gradually burn to death. With that, it shall be the repose of the souls of my people. When Schult fell silent from Al's words, Priscilla openly declared as such, concentrating her power into the yang sword. Following her will, the blade of the yang sword began to emanate a red-hued light. The brilliant, blazing flames snaked towards the edge of the sword, incinerating the evil spirit's tiny body. An ear-splitting screech was released. However, the shriek was eventually swallowed by the flames, fading out slowly and surely, disappearing, cut off without any warning, never to be heard again. That was the final act for the consecutive cases of missing people, the nightmare of Ladrima. 6 Al. From the bottom of that spring, I heard that the bones of the missing people were found one after another. Most of them were turned into piles of bones, but they say that they'll somehow be able to tell apart who's who with the accessories that the victims were wearing. A few days after the incident with the spring was resolved, Al passed down what he had just heard to Priscilla. They were on the balcony at the second floor of the Bariel mansion, during their tea time that was between their working hours. Priscilla, who was drinking the tea that Schult had made for her, frowned at the report from the man that appeared in front of her. Priscilla, that spring, what are you talking about? Al, it's the after-story of the evil spirit-related things that happened very recently. You sound like you forgot it for real and it's scaring me. Priscilla, spring, evil spirit, you are talking about Ladrama. Do not unearth a topic that has already lost my interest. You will make me wonder what is happening. Al, is it my fault? Was it my fault? Okay, I'm sorry. Apologizing to Priscilla, who looked both disinterested and dissatisfied, Al sat down on the side opposite to her. A slightly warm breeze was weaving through the balcony, and the weather was fine to the point that the warmth of the sun could make him drowsy. Priscilla put back her cup on the table, sniffing at Al's lazy attitude. Priscilla, to begin with, how can you unearth a story that is already over in that deplorable state of yours? Just to let you know, you played a lesser part than Schult during that day. Al, stop, cause I can't deny that. You forgot the whole incident, but you remember that. It was hard to forget the truth of him being trapped within the water mirror's illusion, becoming a hindrance to his companions. Al's face reddened inside of the helmet as he was forced to recall the memory of it, pointing a finger at Schult, who was refilling the teacups. Al, really, why didn't the water mirror's trap work on you and Schult? I can understand why it didn't work on you because you're off the charts, but Schult's just a Shota. Schult, yes, I am just a Shota. Al, sorry to say this while you look embarrassed, but Shota isn't a word that's used to praise someone. As Schult laughed shyly, Al patted his head to the point that he was messing up his hair, moving his face closer to the boy. It was as if he was asking for the key to breaking through the illusion, which Schult responded by dropping his gaze to the floor. Schult, I didn't do anything special. Before even that, what illusion? Al, we're starting there. Priscilla, it is not a difficult topic. It is just that Schult did not have a deceased person that he wished to meet, nor did he feel like he had to put on a facade and conceal his desire to, because he does not have anyone that he seek to reunite with. Firstly, his precondition of falling victim to the water mirror's illusion varied from yours. Stealing back Schult from Al, Priscilla put the boy in between her cleavage. While looking at the enviable sight, Al narrowed his eyes, mulling over the contents of Priscilla's clarification. The reason why Schult wasn't caught in the illusion was because he didn't have the happy memories to fulfill the requirements of being trapped in it. Being an orphan, Schult was found when he was on the verge of death, and he didn't have any memories of his family, nor did he have any memories of joyous days from before he had been taken away by Priscilla. Because of that, the illusion didn't work on him. If that was so, was the negation of the effects of the fog a fortunate or an unfortunate thing? Which one was it? Al, at the very least, I don't feel like I was fortunate. It was a period of time where he was associated with the living as well as the dead during the many encounters that he had in the fog. But to Al, all of those were unwanted reunions. Besides, every one of them were fake. His expression hidden within his helmet, Al glanced over at Priscilla, who appeared to be delighted with Schult in her arms. The girl who had pierced the shadows with the blazing Yang sword didn't question him about what he had seen in the fog. Of course, she probably didn't even remember what she had burnt. Although Al understood that she wasn't being considerate or anything, that it was just the result of how she ought to exist, he found solace in her attitude, feeling gratified by it. Priscilla, what is it, Al? Staring at me, you cannot exchange positions with Schult. Al, it's true that I'm jealous, but I'm not looking at you because of that. By the way, you really didn't see anything in the fog. Priscilla, disappointingly, the only person I am familiar with who has passed is my beloved husband. Al, I said he's not dead, even though I met him in the fog, though he's alive. Among the various unwanted reunions that he had, meeting Lape was one of the most awkward experiences that he ever had. Priscilla laughed softly at his revelation, and Schult made a surprised face. After continuing to laugh for a while, she gave a slight tilt of her head. Priscilla, by the way, Al, where did you hear the report of the village that you have given to me just now? Al, a messenger came from the village in question just a little while ago. They told me the whole story, gave their regards to you, and oh yeah, the flowers were delivered to the entrance. Priscilla, you utter fool. Tell me that earlier. Schult, hiya, PR lady Priscilla. Her eyes lighting up at the last segment of Al's report, Priscilla swept Schult up like a princess, rushing out of the balcony. Al got a late start in chasing after her, who ran off at breakneck speed, but he immediately followed her with haste. Like that, Al finally caught up with the two at the mansion's entrance, in front of a bouquet of large flowers. Priscilla, yes, yes. Grandeur, elegant, and truly adorable. I shall praise the residents of Ladrima for it. Putting one hand on her hip in high spirits, Priscilla broke out into a wide smile at the bouquet. The flowers of the finest quality that were brought into the mansion along with the report, its red petals blooming opulently. Priscilla's reaction was close to when she was given a luxurious, golden dragon carriage, when she saw many bizarre works of art, and also when she admired Schult. In other words, she was elated. Al, are those flowers that high quality? Priscilla, how pathetic it is to be ignorant. These are flowers that only bloom in a part of Lugunica, the forest of the spring in Ladrima, called Curani. Al, never heard of them. Wait, what? Did you just say that they only bloom in the forest of that spring? Priscilla, they only bloom during this certain period of time. It may well as be the one thing that makes that puny village worth existing. Crossing her arms and lifting up her bountiful chest, Priscilla nodded over and over again as if she was ascertaining the quality of the flowers. Staring at her serene expression from the side, Al understood why she seemed so eager to resolve the incident of the spring. In retrospect, she was strongly against burning down the forest. Her beaming face told him the reason for this, that, and everything. Al, so, Princess, you saved that village because you were after those flowers from the very beginning, right? Priscilla, do not utter such foolish things. Ladrima is my domain. There is no way that I will grant them my acts of goodwill only because of that. However, I will not deny that it is why I had taken immediate action. Unapologetic and with no intention to hide it, Priscilla walked over to the bouquet unhesitatingly. If the truth of her actions were known, then the villagers that extolled her as a goddess of mercy would be baffled. Of course, there was no point in letting them know. There were things that were better off staying unknown, like how people say that ignorance is bliss. Al, in actuality, you did save the village, even if you were prioritizing your personal desires. Because Priscilla wanted to adore the large, red-hued flowers, the actions she took to do so saved the village, and it ended up leading to the villagers giving her their support. It basically proved what she always said. This world is made to be convenient to myself. Schult, Lady Priscilla, where should I bring the flowers to? Priscilla, you shall adorn my room and the entire mansion with it. While the flowers still contain life, they shall please my eyes with their beauty. Do make sure to treat them attentively so that they do not wilt. Schult, understood, I will do my best. Following Priscilla's orders, Schult ran off in an effort to gather all the vases in the mansion. After watching the young butler's departure, Priscilla noticed Al's presence and, Priscilla, Al, what are you doing? If you have the time to stand there and do nothing, go and be of assistance to Schult. Assume that every one of these petals are worth at least 2 times more than your life. Al, you're being too harsh, Princess. With Priscilla in a good mood, in high spirits, and her tongue being as sharp as ever, Al let out a shameful, wry laugh at her razor-sharp words. And then, before his butt was kicked by the crimson girl who had the red flowers behind her, his cruel and compassionate master, Al rushed to take part in the preparations of carrying the bouquet of flowers into the mansion.